Okay, good evening, everybody. I think those who are attending are now here. This is a virtual meeting of the Scrutiny Committee. So could I ask everybody to mute their microphones first before we continue? Thank you. This is a virtual meeting of the Scrutiny Committee, and for those of you who don't know me, my name is Councillor David Howarth and I'm chair of the committee. Please note this is an audio and video meeting. It is being recorded and the stream is live on YouTube. The web address for this is displayed on the Council's website, and members are asked to keep their microphone on mute and only unmute when they wish to speak. The Cabinet member and officers will present the report, and I will then invite committee members to ask any questions. If any committee members wish to speak, you should raise your hand using the raise the hand feature, and I will then invite you in order. So moving on to the agenda, do we have apologies for absence?
Chair, Councillor Mal Donoghue.
Thank you. Do we have any other apologies? In which case, Councillor Green.
Chairman, apologies from Councillor Marsh, please.
Okay, thank you. Item 2 is declarations of interest. Do we have any declarations? I can't see any raised hands, so we'll move on to item 3, which is minutes of the last Scrutiny Committee held on the 12th of January 2021. Can we have a mover and a seconder for those? If somebody could just move them.
I'll move them.
Thank you.
I'll move them, Chair.
I've got a seconder as well in Councillor Philborn. Can we agree those? I'll take the silence as yes. That takes us to the minutes of the last Scrutiny Budget and Performance panel on the 9th of November 2020. Again, if I could have somebody to move them.
I'll move them.
Thank you. And I've got a seconder there with Councillor Adams. That then moves us on to item 5, matters arising from previous Scrutiny Committee meetings. And I have 2 people indicating they wish to speak, the first of which is Councillor Karen Walton.
Thank you, Chair, and good evening, everyone. I'm repeating my query from the last Scrutiny meeting that the recommendations from June 2019 have not been completed. And I thank the officers for the highlighted progress and comments on 5 recommendations, but there are still 10 accepted recommendations where there is no update or progress. And I would appreciate a more informed response and hopefully look forward to receiving project updates as soon as possible. Thank you.
Could you perhaps indicate which ones, or if you want to drop down an email, we'll certainly get that information for you and we can report it back to the next meeting.
Okay, I'll do that, but it's just that there are still 10, and I think that to have 10 still outstanding is not a good record of our recommendations being put to good use. Thank you.
Right, okay, I've got Councillor Michael Green indicating he wishes to speak. Thanks,
Chairman. Can I first of all welcome Councillor Sue Jones back onto the Scrutiny Committee. It's nice to have Councillor Jones back as a member of Scrutiny, albeit she will be missed as a Cabinet member. So thank you to her for the work that she did in that role. Chairman, I indicated to speak, and it's basically along a very similar line to what Councillor Walton has put forward. It does cause me some concern that a number of recommendations have been accepted, but then the council hasn't taken these forward. So we still haven't seen any master plans, but with the exception of the Leyland one. There are a number of items, particularly on page 33, that were accepted some considerable time ago, but the council doesn't appear to have progressed from 2019 onwards. So there seems to be a lack of action in some of these areas, and I'm just wondering whether we can have a response and an explanation why these haven't been taken forward, and some reassurance that they will be taken forward in the near future. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. I mean, likewise, if we can have a report back to the next Scrutiny Committee, and hopefully we can be given some reasoning as to why things have or haven't happened and at what stage they're at. So with that noted, do we have any other questions on matters arising? No, in which case, if I could now welcome Councillor Matthew Tomlinson, Cabinet Member for Finance, Property and Assets, along with James Thompson, the Section 151 Officer, to present the item 6, which is the budget 2021-22 and the summer position over the medium term.
Thank you, Chair. Just check you can hear me loud and clear. Yeah, good. Okay, so you've got before you the report that is going to Cabinet on Wednesday, and then presuming it's approved by Cabinet, will go for discussion at full council later this month. I think it's been a very challenging year, as it has been for everyone, let alone all councils. And yet this council has risen to that challenge, and I will do it formally at full council, but I do want to pay tribute to our staff for the way they've reacted to the challenges that they've faced. The flexibility, the positivity that they've shown has really been commendable, and shows for me that when it comes to times like this, it's district councils that are best placed to support our residents, and they've done a terrific job. So having said that, outside and away from, if it's possible to get away from coronavirus, I think we've managed to progress quite a few projects. The shared services agenda has certainly moved forward this year, and a range of other things within the capital programme have moved on, if not necessarily moved as quickly as we'd like with some of them. But I think on the whole, it's been a positive year, and I'm confident that when we do the budget outturn, when we do know where all the finances are, this council will be in a healthy and robust place. The headline, I guess, is a council tax freeze, which may raise many eyebrows, I hope in a positive way. And we've had a good look at our finances, and in the short term, things do look very healthy, whilst there are some challenges in the medium term. And with the year that everyone's had, don't forget, thousands of our residents will have been on 80% of their salary. Self-employed people in particular badly hit. As we all know, we're trying our best to support businesses, but they've all been hit. And I think we said in our manifesto we would seek to minimise the tax burden wherever we could. And as someone in this council has also said, we ought to increase taxes when we have to and not when we want to. And it's our view that for this year we can afford to freeze council tax. Just to set that in some context, though, there are some challenges ahead, some of which are outside our control. The future of the business rates regime and the fair funding review that the government have been saying they're going to do for 3, maybe 4 years now, and they keep kicking that particular can down the road. But at some stage they will happen, and we just don't know. We just don't know how that's going to affect our finances. The council, so that's both administrations, have been quite astute, I think, in putting aside reserves to cover for that. So in the worst possible scenario on the business rates review, we could lose £1.5 million a year. And yet we've over £3 million set aside in a reserve. And we contributed more to that last year. So that is there to smooth us over any bumps that come in the road. The report for the first time acknowledges the challenges of the business rates review and fair funding. It's never really been put into the medium-term financial strategy before because we didn't know, and so we decided to pretend it wasn't going to happen. But it has to come at some stage, and so what we are now doing is reflecting that in the medium-term financial strategy, which is why not next year, but the year after and the year after that, we are showing deficits in our revenue account. That is a worst possible scenario. We do have reserves to smooth that out, and we can start to look at that when we actually know where we're going to. As I said, we're in the hands of the government on that one, as is every district council in the country. Lots of stories about what the fair funding review will mean, but at this stage, no one really knows. But as I said, we do have significant reserves, so we should be able to smooth that out over a 2-3 year period. And other than that, leisure. We need to come on to leisure. As we all know, leisure has probably faced the most difficult year, leisure and hospitality in particular, really challenging year, when basically our leisure centres haven't really been open for nearly 12 months. The contract with Serco, as we've known for a while, is coming to an end. And frankly, the market doesn't really exist for going out to tender on these. We did talk to Serco about extensions, and they came back with an offer. Frankly, the offer isn't that much different than the figures you see in this chart, which presumes we will bring it in-house. What the Serco offer did do, actually, was it protected Serco from any losses, but should leisure bounce back quickly and there be any profits, those profits would have gone to Serco. As you'll know, Council has now taken the decision to bring the leisure services back in-house while we investigate the future. It's a lengthy report. I don't want to go on too long, Chairman. It's your meeting. I know James is online and will be able to answer any technical questions. If the questions about politics or direction, I'm hoping I'll be able to help you in your work tonight.
Okay, thank you. I'm sure you're now open to questions, and the first one is from myself. What form is the consultation on the budget proposals taking? How are we making sure it's representative, and will businesses be consulted as key stakeholders?
Okay, so we're unofficially consulting now. Members will see that is online, and we've had getting up towards 100 responses so far. As we all know, these online responses don't necessarily get a great response, certainly in the early stages. Obviously, this will go to Cabinet to become official, and then we'll consult with a range of other official stakeholders, such as the County Council, and we'll be relying on members to get the story out there as well. So, as with any consultation, it's a case of doing your best and doing what is reasonable, I think, doing what is reasonable to say you're trying to get an idea of what people think.
Okay, thank you. Can I bring in Councillor Will Adams?
Thank you, Chair. Just on the business rates, with the impact, obviously, of COVID on businesses, are we projecting a reduction in income from business rates? And also, sorry, just to add to that as well, will there be any redistribution of business rates from other councils who may be more adversely affected through businesses not paying business rates or having lots of vacancies? Thank you.
Okay, thanks for that. I think the second part of your question is probably a question for government. And as they begin to look at the whole future of business rates, that is something they will have to consider. The business rates that we get in at South Ribble, there's a time lag. So unlike council tax, where council tax is paid this year and comes in our account this year, with business rates, we collect the money, send it off to the Treasury. It's churned through some complicated formula that I'm sure James understands, but I'm going to hold my hands up and say I don't really. And then they decide how much to send back. So we never get back the exact same amount of money that we send down there anyway. And of course, the biggest amount of it would go to LCC anyway. So there may well be a reduction in future years but that's likely to take a couple of years to get through the system. A lot of businesses are currently on business rate holidays, and that funding, as far as I'm concerned, has been guaranteed to us anyway. So undoubtedly there'll be some knock-on, but it's likely to take a while. And,
Okay,
and Chair, I think James has got his hands up.
Can I just bring in James Thompson, who might be able to add to that?
Thank you, Chair. So the first question about loss of business rates, the government has put something in place that if we do find ourselves short on collection this year and in future years, we can spread that out over the following 3 years. So normally if we were short this year in 2020-21, most of that deficit would be realised in the following year, but the government has put something in place to spread that out over 3 years. Now, actually, the budget monitoring reports have reported this, the collection rates, and the next monitoring report will go in March. And business rates collections has been performing quite well despite COVID, so we hope it won't be a huge hit for the council. In terms of vacancies going forward, it's very difficult to estimate what hit that will have on the council, because it depends on what the future business rate system looks like. But at the moment, the council keeps roughly 40% of the income it collects. So of the 30 million, it's about 40% of that. Now that might change depending on whether they do implement a 75% system, and there's also lots of uncertainty regarding revaluations in a couple of years as well. So it's difficult to answer that second question, but at the moment, it's around 40% the council would take the hit on, I suppose, if business rates were to reduce, and that's why we set those reserves aside, so we can manage one-off in-year reductions.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Michael Green, you had your hand up for some time now, sir.
Thanks, Chairman. It might have passed actually, but it was a supplementary to your initial question, and it was about the consultation on the budget. So I think the report made reference to the fact that consultation wouldn't start until the report had been approved by Cabinet, which I think is normal practice, and it was just to ask why we'd actually started the consultation earlier, albeit that might be a way of gathering more responses, but technically Cabinet could decide not to go ahead with the budget which has been published and proceed on a different basis on Wednesday evening. So I'm just wondering why it started earlier. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Tomlinson?
Yeah, and Councillor Green has answered the question for me, actually. He is right, of course. Technically, this isn't the budget until Wednesday, but we did want to get round that accusation as much as we could, that we don't give people enough time to consult. And so it was a very specific question from our comms team. Did we want to go early with the consultation, almost on the presumption that Cabinet would approve this on Wednesday? And the answer to that question was yes. The more responses we can get, the more rounded view we get of what our residents and stakeholders, one, think of what we're doing, and two, actually think we should be doing, which is always useful.
Okay, thank you. Can I bring in Councillor Jackie Alty?
Well, my question was around page 38, paragraph 13, mentioning any concerns about the council tax, but in your verbal report at the start, you covered everything in my question. So thank you. I have nothing more to ask. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. That was easy enough. Can I bring in Councillor Michael Green, who has two more questions?
Thanks, Chairman. And before actually asking that, I would like to agree with Councillor Tomlinson's earlier comment regarding what our staff at the council have done over the last 12 months. And it's to their credit how they've adapted to provide for the residents of South Hibble. So well done, everyone. Turning to the question, Chairman, on page 41, bullet point 1, the paragraph states that the impact of fees and charges will not be permanent. How confident is Councillor Tomlinson that this is the case, with the possibility that people's behaviours may well change following lockdown and may not revert to what they were 12 months ago?
I'm as confident as anyone else is in predicting what the post-COVID world will look like, I guess. If you look at the examples that are shown there, garden waste subscriptions actually went up last year when we were at the height of the pandemic, or certainly, sorry, the height of the first wave. Obviously, this last wave has been even worse than the first wave. But when we experienced that first lockdown, that went up. Planning applications, the planning department seems to be as busy as ever. So there's no reason to think that once things do stabilise, those sources of income ought to be affected to such a significant amount that we can confidently predict it in the MTFS and quote a different figure.
Okay, thank you. Can I just bring in Councillor Matt Trafford?
Thanks, Chair. Going back a page, sorry. There's reference to £52,000 that we've received from the government in preparation for Brexit. So would I be right in looking at that and thinking that's not actually a lot? And if I am right in thinking that, are we expecting any more from the government on this? Is there a plan in case we don't get any more? Or is there a plan to see if we can get any more from the government on this? Thank you.
I'm going to pass over to James, if you'll forgive me, Chairman.
Yes, certainly. The funding we've got from Brexit was actually, it's about a couple of years old. And a lot of councils aren't too sure what we can do with it. So some used it to stockpile things like fuel for their bin collections and for their vehicles and things like that. I think Brexit's much more affected those on the coast that rely, especially in the south, on trade with continental Europe. So we hold that in reserve, and we will use it when we can better understand what the impact of Brexit has been on the council, really. But again, the specifics around that grant are quite broad, and I would assume that if we wanted to spend it on something, then we could do. We just haven't really nailed that down yet, because we still don't fully understand what the impact of Brexit will be on South Ribble Council. So.
Okay, thank you. If I could bring Councillor Green back in with a question on page 43.
Thanks, Chairman. If I could refer Councillor Tomlinson to the table at the top of page 43 regarding balancing the budget. And please, could you talk us through the table and whether a deficit or surplus is expected in 2022 onwards?
Okay, so the top line is where we think they're all deficits affected by both business rates uncertainty. So they're all built in there. That's the worst possible scenario. And then underneath of that, you've got a range of efficiency savings that we'll be looking for. So people will know about the shared services agenda that we're pursuing, the changes in parking charges that went through Cabinet quite recently, and the annual savings we make from staff leaving, and there usually being a gap before those staff can be replaced. So, having said all that, next year, 21-22, we're actually expecting a surplus. Even with the council tax freeze, we're projecting a surplus of some 346,000. And then the years after are deficits. But that does, as I say, that includes the worst possible case scenario around the business rates.
Thank you. And if I can come back, Chairman. So a great deal of reliance is being placed on shared service efficiency savings moving forward. How confident are we as a council at achieving these savings? And importantly, what will be the impact upon our services to the residents of South Ribble? Okay,
well, I think the shared services agenda has stepped up a gear in the last 12 months or so. And we have, as you know, already saved a significant amount of money. And we now have shared services across a range of the council's areas, if you'll excuse me. To what I am confident of, Councillor Green, that in terms of affecting the services to the residents, this will have none or minimal effect, because the Shared Services Committee, that's always one of the first things they consider when the leadership team come forward with suggestions for extending the shared services agenda. The first question that people on that committee want to know is, how will this affect the service that the residents of both our boroughs receive? So I would confidently predict, one, that the leadership team wouldn't bring forward options that meant a reduction in service to our residents, and two, if they did, I think they'd struggle to get it through the Shared Services Committee, which is a robust and engaging committee, I think, where people are not afraid to express their opinions. So I'm confident. I think there's a way to go yet on shared services. There are other things we can look at, certainly across back office services, but more interestingly, gateway, those things that we think are front line services, they can still benefit from shared services. And I think I made that a really important point, that shared services is a real benefit for everybody concerned. We're building bigger and more robust teams where they're not as susceptible to illness or maternity leave, because you've got bigger teams. There's better opportunities for promotion within those teams, and those teams are bringing a range of skills and experience to bear that I think brings better outcomes from our residents, actually.
Thank you.
Okay. Right, if I can move on to Councillor Colin Coulson.
Thank you, Chair, and welcome to our meeting. On page 43, paragraph 31, you projected an increase in income from car parking of 18k. How did you decide on that figure, and how realistic is it that you will achieve the 18k increase in income?
Okay. Thanks for your question, Colin. That figure comes from the Cabinet report that Councillor Jones took through Cabinet 2 meetings ago, I think. And where we looked, as we said we would, we had a review of all car parking right across the borough. And you remember, we're going to get rid of the blue bays in town centre car parks and have free parking for an hour for all of our residents. But that was the prediction. Like all things, it's a budget, it is a prediction, but it's certainly not a figure that we've just plucked from thin air. And I hope it's a figure that people who were at that Cabinet meeting will recognise.
Okay, thank you. Can I bring in Councillor?
So how confident are you?
I think it's a realistic. I'm as confident as I am in Councillor Susan Jones. She brought the report forward. We all know what a diligent and dedicated Cabinet member she was, and if she brought that report forward with those figures in, I have every confidence in them.
You sold it well.
Sorry, can I just bring Councillor Thirlborn in before you move on to another question?
Good evening, Councillor Thompson. I think you kind of answered this already in an answer to Councillor Green. The forecasted increase in parking, would that be reinvested back in parking? But I think you've already answered that in the forecast in the budget tables already, I do believe.
There is, to be fair, Councillor Thorburn, there isn't much in the revenue account that we ring fence necessarily for things like that. But the work that Councillor Jones did included a lot of investment into our car parks, such as installing electrical charging points and things like that. So, we do have plans to invest in our car parks. But I think, I'd be going too far if I said every penny we make out of car parking will automatically be repensed to go back into car parks, because that's not how the budget tends to work.
Right, that's fair enough.
Okay, Councillor Coulton, you have a second question?
I have you. Thank you, Chair. On page 44, under the heading Investment in Priorities, 117k has been allocated to the community hubs, which obviously interests me as a chair of the Western Parishes hub. How will this money be allocated per hub? Will it be done on population or whatever? And how will this money be spent? And will there be any constraints on how it is spent? Thank you.
Okay, well, I think as long as it complies with our corporate priorities, there certainly won't be any constraints on how it's spent. That's up to the hubs themselves to decide as much as possible. What we tried to do is try to get rid of the constraints, actually. If you remember, under the neighbourhood forum model that we had previously, you had to get the majority of councillors on the forum to agree, and then it had to be signed off by a cabinet member. And so we want to get rid of that and give the forums a bit more freedom. It will necessitate trust in the chair and the vice chair, but I'm guessing if they don't live up to that trust, the forum can always let them know what they think of them at the end of the year. But no, certainly no additional constraints, quite the opposite. And as far as I know, the view of my cabinet colleagues is that if we're going to devolve that decision making down to these hubs, then they ought to decide what they spend the money on. You remember as well, Councillor Coulton, we put extra money into the money that these hubs could spend with the central pot that hubs can bid into if there are any specific projects they want to deliver that are over and above the budget that they currently have. I would have to say that the hubs are sitting on quite a bit of money, and really, if they want to move projects forward, there are considerable reserves in those funds. So I look forward to the new hubs. And this is probably one area of the council that has been delayed and is different because of the COVID-19 pandemic. But I look forward to them getting up and running and delivering things in their areas.
Just picking up, I think I will, as chair, discuss how we spend the money with the rest of the councillors before we actually spend it. I think rather than just myself and the vice chair deciding, I think I would bring the rest of the councillors into it.
And I think that would be a very wise chair and vice chair anyway. I don't think it's the intention to allow the chair and vice chair to just go and spend money willy-nilly, if you'll pardon the phrase. But it is, we just want to get rid of some of the bureaucracy. Some decisions were about spending £150, and the actual cost of the bureaucracy to deliver that came to more than £150, which is just, well, it's nonsense.
Okay.
Right, thank you.
Can I bring in Councillor Colin Sharples?
Yeah. Evening, Matthew.
Hi.
Same page, 44, investing in priorities. Will there be a return on investments from the additional funding being provided? And how do we ensure value for money?
Okay, a big question. Is that on all of them, Councillor Sharples, or on any particular one?
Generally, it'll do.
Okay, I mean, we obviously our corporate priorities are now well established, and we'd expect to return against those corporate priorities on all of the things that you see here. You'll know that value for money, certainly on a cabinet decision, is always one of the things that we look at, and we'd look to consider how we achieve that, whether that's through social value, whether that's through monetary outcomes or physical outcomes, wherever we can. I think we've already established a decent track record on looking for that, and I don't expect things to be any different going forward.
Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you. Can I bring in Councillor Karen Walton?
Thank you, Chair. Good evening, Councillor Tomlinson.
Hi,
My question is on page 46, and it's a reference made to a transformation programme and the many different aspects of this, such as organisational change and development. Can you explain to us how this will be developed going forward, and what will member involvement be in the development of the transformation programme going forward?
Okay, I mean, we will need a transformation programme going forward if the worst comes to the worst and we need to deliver the significant savings that our worst case scenario projections say we will. So the need for such a strategy is, I think, fairly self-evident. And in fact, we've been going through transformation for a while now, under the previous administration and under the current one. A lot of that IT related. So we've completely, revisited how look at us all tonight. If you'd have thought 2 years ago, we'd all be sat at home attending a scrutiny meeting. So that is an example of how the council needs to transform. But we will need to look at other opportunities. I would expect that to begin with the senior leadership team, and then be disseminated out through cabinet to wider members. But I think, to be fair, most of the transformation journeys we've been on here at South Ribble have involved members in some degree. I can remember us having very lengthy debates about transformation of the senior leadership team, etc., and I don't expect that to be any different. But I think that what that does highlight, that if the worst comes to the worst, and we do need, I know many of you will know our MP, who's part of the ruling party. We will need our MPs to speak up for district councils when changes come to business rates and the fair funding review, because it could be really, really challenging for district councils. I know there are many district councils that have got Conservative leaderships, and I'm sure they'll be making their voices heard. But we do have two Conservative MPs that cover South Ribble Borough Council, and I hope that those of you who've got inroads or ways of communicating with their MPs that are more effective than mine will use them just to make sure our voices are heard. But sorry, Karen, I'm rabbiting on now.
So can I have your assurance, Matthew, that members will be involved?
Absolutely.
In as much as they can be, because I think it's only fair that members are updated and are involved in any transformation that takes place. Thank you.
I agree.
Thank you. Councillor Thirlborn, you'd like some more rabbiting, apparently.
Sorry.
Can I just bring you to page 47, item 39, talking about council tax freezing? As we welcome fair taxing, everybody understands that taxes have to be paid. What is the risk to South Ribble Borough Council in freezing their element of that portion of the council tax? And has that been actually recorded on the risk register?
The answer to the second part of your question is I don't know whether it's identified as a risk on the risk register. I mean, the outcome of a freezing council tax, of course, is that we don't get in any extra money from the council taxpayer next year. 1% of council tax comes to around about £75,000. So a 1.99% increase, which is what the government were instructing us almost to do, would give us £150,000 a year to spend extra. But, not just next year, but the years after as well. But I want to stress, this is not a decision we've taken lightly. It's not a gimmick. We have nothing to gain from this. In year 2, of a 4-year administration. It is just looking at the short-term figures, appreciating what a difficult year our residents have had, and doing our best to stick to the promises we made prior to the previous election. So I think we've taken all those three things on board, and said that it's not just a good thing to do for our residents, it's a reasonable and prudent thing to do for this council, and if we can afford it, we should do it. Perhaps somebody from our audit team might be able to give you an answer about the risk register, Councillor Thorburn.
If I could just bring in the Chief Executive.
Thank you, Chair. I'm happy to respond to that one. So it's not specifically referenced in the risk register, and as Councillor Tomlinson has said, the risk is relatively small in financial terms. The biggest single risk remains the fair funding review and the business rates review, and that is identified in the business rate in the risk register. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you.
Okay, could I bring in Councillor Colin Sharples again?
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, I'm moving on to page 48, Matthew, bullet point 4, which talks about the review of reserves. How and when will this review be undertaken?
Okay, thanks for the question. A review of reserves is something I've been talking about for the past 18 months or so, and some of the reserves have already been, I know that the managers have been told to go away and look at what their current reserve holding is and whether it's still appropriate. The council needs reserves. I've always been of the opinion that they're on the high side of what is reasonable, and we continue to look at those in a robust fashion. But for instance, the business rates retention reserve, quite clearly, if the worst comes to the worst, we will need every single penny of that. The borough investment account, members will know we've already committed a significant amount of that to projects at Worden Hall and Mutual Village Hall, and we've got ideas about what else we can do with it. The City Deal Reserve is another one where there's great uncertainty. But when you start drilling down, there are other reserves that it's really time for us to start getting on and spending if they need spending. So I think it's a bit of a moving feast, but I know the staff are on with it. I see James has put his hand up, so perhaps he'll be able to give you a more detailed response.
Okay, can I bring James in?
Thanks, Chair. Yes, we have undertaken a review of reserves for both 2021 and moving forward. So some of the investments that you see in the additional investments part of the report will be funded through reserves. So things like the community hubs are part funded through some reserves which were no longer committed. The credit union, so not only do we have these earmarked reserves, but we're also putting them in the budget to spend them. Some reserves were moved around to deal with some of the risks that we have. So reducing the business rates retention reserve to 3 million, but then moving some of that into an income equalisation reserve to deal with the fact that the council has £1.1 million worth of investment income from about 160 different units that it owns, and that potentially some of those may become vacant. So we've put reserves aside for that. As we've already mentioned, there's a transformation fund now set up. So the review of reserves has been undertaken and will continue to be undertaken as we monitor the budget. In specifically with paragraph 48, it references the general fund, and what we do have at other councils across the country is they are winding down their general fund to deal with future budget deficits. That's not something we're proposing to do. We're looking to implement the transformation strategy, develop it, and try and balance the budget without doing that. But that's what that paragraph's saying really, is that if we need to use general funds to, in the short term, manage budget deficits, that might be something we look at, but hopefully it's not something we'll need.
Yeah, thank you for both those answers.
Okay, thank you. Can I bring Councillor Karen Walton back in?
Thank you, Chair. It's on page 50 concerning the leisure services. Can you talk us through what steps are being taken to manage the risks associated with taking the leisure centres back in-house? And does the council have the capacity and resources such as officer expertise to manage the transition? And what could the financial impact on the council be in the future of this?
Okay, thank you for the question. Obviously, it's a significant change for the council, one that we welcome. I think certainly in our group we welcome this, and we see great opportunities in it. If I can refer to the table at the bottom of page 51, and here's where I'm going to ask James to jump in if I get any of this wrong, because we did spend a good hour over just this table late last week. You'll see there are, in the short term, significant financial risks to the council, and that's summed up at the bottom line in each report. So these are, if you'll forgive me, conservative with a small c. So it may well be that these figures don't come out as challenging as they are shown in this report. But they do show over a 3-year period as getting towards a balanced figure. As I said in my earlier comments at the beginning, the market for outsourcing these is very, very challenging at the moment. Our contract runs out at the end of March, as we all know, and the offer for an extension wasn't much different to the figures you see before you. So we are faced with what we're faced. We were planning to spend some money on our leisure centres in the coming, in the fairly short term, over the next 2 or 3 years, and it may well be we might have to divert some of that capital funding, or not invest in that capital funding, so that we can balance the books a little better. But it's going to be both a challenging and, I think, exciting time for not just this council but our staff, and the ability to react to local conditions a little more flexibly, I think, is to be welcomed. We've all known for a while, and we've been talking about the future of leisure at South Ribble for at least 5 years. And we're now coming to a period where it all begins to happen. Yes, is it challenging? But is it also interesting and exciting? Yes, it is.
Thank you. Thank you, Matthew. Can I just come back on that? And could I ask Councillor Tomlinson to come back in 6 months' time and give us an update on where we are financially and with expertise, so that we can scrutinise this service in greater detail? Thank you very much.
Thank you. I have hands being thrust around the place. If I can bring in Councillor Will Adams first.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, just on the leisure centre provision, I think it's important, obviously, we talk about the risks and how we mitigate them, but I also think it's also important.
Sorry, I'm sorry, Councillor Adams. My internet just the chairman introduced you, my internet cut out, so I just lost about 25 seconds of whatever was being said. I do apologise.
Okay, no problem.
Yeah, if you would like to start again.
Maybe we should have Jackie Weaver on this just to make sure we go through it. Thank you, Chair. No, I was just saying, I think while it's important we talk about when it comes to our leisure centre provision, the risk and how we mitigate them, I think it's also important, particularly on this decision, regarding the insourcing of leisure, the opportunity that will bring to our residents. From what, and my question to you is, what, in your opinion, are those opportunities, and how can we try and improve leisure provision for our residents?
Well, I think that the first opportunity, I think, is under the contract, which has been, it's been a long-running, relatively successful contract. But like most outsourcing, what outsourcing does, it socialises the risk and privatises the profit. So when our leisure centres were losing money, suddenly we had to support them. When it was making a profit, then Serco were happy to take the profit and take the money out of South Ribble, frankly, because a lot of it went for recharges for management fees for consultants sat in Serco's head office. So I think that's one of the great opportunities. We can run these leisure centres for what we see to be the benefits of our residents, and take advantage of any profits that may be accrued from that. But I think this is not just us that's doing this. While I'd like to say this is us being a radical and exciting council taking things forward, which of course we are. But on leisure, Chorley, Wigan, Stockport, and councils all over the country are finding that this is the best way now to go forward with leisure. I think the days of just everything needs to be outsourced because that's better are well and truly gone.
Okay, thank you. Can I bring in Councillor Matt Trafford?
Thanks, Chair. Just whilst we're on risk, externally there seems to be three big issues in terms of causing uncertainty. There's reference throughout to COVID, Brexit, and also the fair funding review. So we have this pot of money for dealing with anything that's unforeseeable, which has £4.2 million in it. And what I'm asking is are we confident that that's enough? Should one of these or all these three things hit us really hard? And if not, what's the plan for sort of making sure that we're prepared? Thanks.
Okay, am I confident that the general reserve is enough? I am 27% of our turnover. I think it's healthy. Personal view, it's right at the top of what is healthy, because the other risk that you talked about, we do have funds elsewhere to deal with that. So we've got the business rates review, we've got the income reserve, and we do have money that we were planning to spend on leisure anyway, to get us through the first 3 years of bringing them back in-house should we need it. I have to just re-emphasise the figures quoted in the report, and quite rightly so, are always conservative. This is based on the worst case scenario so that we can plan properly. But I know I'm confident, Councillor Trafford, that the general reserve is at least appropriate and probably a bit more.
Okay, thank you. Can I bring Councillor Coulton back in with a question on the capital budget?
Thank you, Chair. On page 56, it shows the capital budget. How did you decide on this capital budget in its present form? Did you consult or whatever? Where did you get the information from? Thank you.
Well, a lot of this, Councillor Coulton, has been in the capital programme for a while. Things have been in here for 2-3 years. Much of the work, for instance, that's going to go on at Worden Park has been in the capital programme at every budget meeting for 2 or 3 years. The Worden Hall refurbishment, which is a big chunk of money there, we all know the process we've got through to there. And frankly, some of it comes from approaches from individual members. Councillor Bretherton this time last year was talking to Councillor Jones about playground. I'm sorry, Councillor Campbell's here as well. They were talking to Councillor Jones about a playground in their ward. It's now in the capital programme, and it was really nice to see an email from them to Councillor Jones thanking her for the work that they did. So they come from a range of places. But I think the best thing to say about this capital programme is what an exciting time it looks ahead for our people on delivering the priorities of the Labour-run council and sticking to our manifesto promises.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Next question is from me. How deliverable do you think that the 20 21-22 capital programme of 15.8 million is, especially as you might need somebody else's support to get it through.
I'm not quite sure to what you're referring there, Chairman, but I shall proceed anyway. I'm always keen for us to present a capital programme that can be delivered. We all know this year that things happen and things always will happen. But it's always been my view that you shouldn't overpromise. So you certainly shouldn't be saying to people, we're going to spend all this money and then not do it without a really good reason. There will be, undoubtedly, there'll be some slippage, but where there is slippage, we will do our best to explain why there's slippage. But again, I think it's challenging, and it should be, but the other thing it should be is realistic, and I believe it is realistic.
Okay, thank you. Can I bring in Councillor Colin Sharples?
Thank you. Yeah, I think I have the pleasure and privilege of asking the final question, Matthew. Again, on the capital budget, how will my neighbourhood hubs and ward members be involved in the project in their area? For example, the playgrounds and things like that.
Yeah, so certainly it would be my intention that as and when these playground schemes come forward, the hubs be consulted on them. That hasn't always happened in the past, I have to say. But I'd certainly, once these hubs are up and running, I'd be hoping that the chairs of the hubs would be a conduit, really, to get people's views. We also do, we have now started doing wider public consultations. So, for instance, there is a playground on Hague Avenue in Leyland that's in last year's, or the current year's, capital programme. And we're hoping to get on with that in the very early spring. But there's been quite a wide public consultation on that. I'm sure members will be pleased to hear that some of that has involved putting letters through letterboxes, because I know some members do like that kind of thing. But just to go back to what I was saying originally, as and when these projects come up, I would fully expect hubs to be consulted.
Okay, thank you. Can I bring in Councillor Sue Jones?
Thanks, Chair. Just to support basically what Councillor Tomlinson said, I think it was very, very important that when we were proposing to spend quite large amounts of money on playgrounds, that we actually consulted with the members and the community hubs. And the last few proposals, I actually visited the areas where members were wanting to develop through the community hubs, and also hopefully the development of friends groups to support those areas once that everything was completed. And I've been really happy to meet with the members to pursue that, and hopefully that will be ongoing in the future. Thank you.
Thank you. I know that's certainly happened in Penwitham, where I've been involved, so thank you for that. Do we have any other questions from members of the committee at this stage? Councillor Michael Green.
Thanks, Chairman. Councillor Tomlinson, in terms of the crucially important role of scrutiny in terms of being a critical friend, do you feel in general that we've been fair in our line of questioning this evening? And is there any way that you'd like us to be more robust in the questioning in future years to genuinely assist you in your role moving forwards?
Councillor Green will know I've always been a big supporter of scrutiny. Had the pleasure of being the chair here at South Ribble. And it is a balancing act, that critical friend. But I think as an administration, we genuinely welcome scrutiny. I think the best decisions, in principle, the best decisions are taken when they've been scrutinised properly. And it does lead to better decision making. One of the things I would like to look at in the future is doing this a bit earlier. It's not always easy because we don't get our final figures from funding from the government usually until the day before Christmas Eve. So it is always a little bit of a challenge to bring a budget forward. But certainly I'll be looking. It was something I wanted to do this year but couldn't do for a variety of reasons. But certainly consulting with Scrutiny about the direction of travel of the budget is something I'd like to explore further. But yeah, I welcome the question as a genuine, to open a genuine discussion about how Scrutiny can look at the budget. I've never been a fan of producing rabbits at hats at Scrutiny meetings. I don't think it's a good way of planning budgets. And the more we all understand it, and the longer the time over which it's planned, I think actually results in better financial planning.
Okay, thank you. Do we have any other questions from members of committee? I can't see any, in which case, are there any questions from members not on committee? Likewise, I can't see any. At this point, we normally ask for questions from members of the public. However, unfortunately, because of the current circumstances, they can only watch via YouTube. If there are any questions, I'm sure if you write in, we'd be more than happy to get the answers for you. If I could now ask Darren to take us through the recommendations.
Chairman, before we do that.
Sorry, Councillor Green? Yeah.
Is there any way to look at this again? Because the public could genuinely add to the scrutiny process. I know traditionally that there's only been a few members of the public that have engaged with the Scrutiny Committee. But from time to time, they can play a very valuable role, and we've seen that over the years. It's rather unfortunate that we are shutting them out, and there are other meetings where we or other councils are facilitating the public involvement in committee meetings, and I'd like us to look at whether we can do that for scrutiny moving forwards, and that this is the last meeting where we exclude the public. Thank you.
I'm sure we can go away and look at it, and we will come back with the answer in due course.
Thank you.
So, Darren.
Thank you, Chair. Just some of the themes from the questions from the committee, just as suggestions really for you to consider. The recommendations could potentially be that the committee thanks the Cabinet Member and Section 151 officer for attending and their detailed, clear report. The committee welcomes the commitment to involve members in developing the transformation strategy. The committee invites the Cabinet Member to provide an update on leisure centre management in 6 months' time, and that the committee notes the reassurance that from the Cabinet Member that the capital programme is deliverable. And finally, the committee is grateful to the Cabinet Member for suggesting that the Scrutiny Committee be consulted earlier in the budget process for future years. Thank you, Chair.
Okay, thank you. Is there anything anybody would like to add to those? Councillor Green.
Thanks, Chairman. Happy to support all of those. I've just got a concern over the leisure centre management item, and I'm just wondering whether that could be brought forward earlier than 6 months and as a regular item moving forwards, because it is a clear item of risk to the council. So I think it would be helpful if we could involve scrutiny on a regular basis and earlier than 6 months, please.
Okay, I think it was Councillor Karen Walton's suggestion that it be 6 months, but James would like to come in here.
Yeah, just in terms of monitoring how the leisure centres are performing, we will be taking that through our quarterly budget monitoring reports, which also go to scrutiny. So hopefully that'll be more regular than just 6 months. So.
Okay, thank you. Can I bring the Chief Executive in?
Thank you, Chair. I think this is a question not necessarily about financial risk, but operational risk as well, in regard to expertise and capability. So I can reassure members that that's on the leadership team radar, and I'd be more than happy to bring some of those things back much earlier to the Scrutiny Committee, and we'll find some space in the calendar to do that.
Okay, thank you. Does that answer your question? Councillor Green?
Yes, that's thank you.
Okay, on that basis then, can we agree the recommendations? I'll take nods and silence as a yes. Thank you. In which case that takes us on to our favourite, item 7, the Word and Hold Progress Report, which is going to be presented again by Councillor Matthew Tomlinson, and we have Neil Anderson in assistance. So, Councillor Tomlinson.
Thanks, Chair. And my report takes the form of a verbal report for the first time for quite a long time, but it's not that long since I reported on this to scrutiny. What I can say is there has progress been made since the last meeting. The planning application is all but complete now. Still waiting for an environmental report just to make sure. What I don't want this to go to the planning committee and people to be asking questions that we can't answer. So we're just waiting for, I think, one ecologist report to come back now. And then it's the intention to go to planning. I think, forgive me, I could be corrected on this. I think it's the 4th of March. It's certainly very early next month. So hopefully a full planning application will be ready to go. We've now completed the tender exercise for procurement of the architect, structural engineers and mechanical. And I think some of that went through cabinet. And you'll recall there was a question from a member of the public about how we procured that. But we've begun now to procure some of the enabling works that will make sure the site is ready for us to get on there. And I'm confident we should see people on site getting ready by the end of March. The timetable for beginning the substantive works and for completion sometime early summer of next year remain unchanged. And I think that's a fair summary of what has happened since we last met as a Scrutiny Committee Chairman.
Okay, thank you. That answers the first question as what progress has been made since we last met. So if I can bring in Councillor Karen Walton.
Hello, thank you.
Hi.
Can you talk us through what project monitoring arrangements are in place, and has the council enough officer expertise to do this?
Okay, well, the second part of your question, the answer is no. Certainly when it comes to that kind of clerk of works, I still call it. I don't know if that's an old-fashioned term, but having someone with the expertise to keep an eye on how this project is being delivered and that it's delivered in budget. The committee will know my absolute commitment to do my utmost to get this delivered on budget. We don't have that in-house because we don't deliver a project like this very often. And so we have gone out to tender. And as I reported at Cabinet, I'm really thrilled that it's a South Ribble firm that's won the contract to oversee this work for us.
Okay, thank you. Can I bring in Councillor Stephen Thirlbourne?
Is the project still on track for opening for Leyland Festival 2022?
It is. Certainly, whilst the planning permission is delayed by one committee meeting, certainly in terms of getting on the ground, and as I said, hopefully somebody there before the end of this financial year, so late March, and then completed, as I said in my earlier remarks, early summer of next year. If I'm saying early summer, and we're hoping to have a Leyland Festival next year, and that's usually the first week in June. So that's the target. That is the target.
Can I just come back on that? Would it be possible for members of the Scrutiny Committee to come and see the site when it's set up?
A site visit is something I'd be happy to facilitate when there's something to see, yeah.
Because we've done a lot of talking about it. It's just good for the committee to see what we're actually talking about.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, happy to try and make that, post-COVID when it's safe for us all to meet. Happy to facilitate that, Chairman.
Okay, thank you. Do we have any other questions from members on committee? I can't see anybody. Are there any questions from members not on committee? Again, I can't see any. One thing that members might like to consider at this stage is whether this continues as a standing item, given the timescales have been set and regular updates will be provided in the budget performance scrutiny panel. Do we have any comments on that?
Chairman, I would invite Dominic Bold to comment.
Okay, yeah.
Cabinet members always get a feedback form after the Scrutiny Committee, and we're asked several questions about your conduct and how we thought it went. One of the things I was going to suggest tonight is, now that we do have a set timetable, whether this could stop being a standing item, and if you wanted to do it every other committee meeting or as and when you felt it necessary. But it does feel now a little bit as though coming to every single Scrutiny Committee meeting, now that progress has been made and is being made, does seem not counterproductive. Of course it's not counterproductive, but whether it's causing work for people that isn't necessarily needed.
Thank you. Councillor Colin Sharples.
Thanks, Chair. Yeah, I would concur with what Matthew just said. I think it would be important for Matthew to come back to us if something suddenly changed and there was an issue that we needed to know about and address. Apart from that, I think, in 2 or 3 months' time, it would be better than every month, because there's very little that Matthew can tell us from month to month, really.
Okay, Councillor Karen Walton.
Thank you, Chair. Seeing as this item was brought up by Matthew to be brought up at every scrutiny meeting, I don't think we should let the item go. I think that we should keep an eye on it, because it is a very important project for South Ribble and it is going to cost a lot of money, and I think it's one of the things that we should really insist that we keep it, if it's not every meeting, at least every other meeting, so that we can scrutinise what's happening to the actual project. Thank you.
Okay, Councillor Green, you indicated and went back again. Would you like to come in?
Briefly then, Chairman, Councillor Walton had basically covered the point I was going to make, that there needs to be an ongoing look at this moving forward, but it perhaps doesn't need to come to every single meeting. So if we'll leave it off the agenda for the next meeting, bring it in 2 meetings' time, and obviously if there's something in the meantime that scrutiny really needs to look at, or alternative that Councillor Tomlinson really wants us to look at, I'm sure the lines of communication would exist to allow us to bring it forward to another meeting. But in the meantime, if we just alternate it on the meeting schedules, I think that would be helpful.
Okay, thank you. That's very useful. Councillor Thirlborn.
Just a suggestion, Chair, if the group wants it on every meeting rather than Councillor Tomlinson appearing himself, just a very quick update report, a written report to the committee, just to let us know, and then he appears every other meeting, just as a suggestion.
Thank you. It's very difficult to scrutinise a report if there aren't people here to actually answer the questions. Do we have any other comments on that? If not, there has been a suggestion that we alter. Councillor Will Adams.
Sorry, Chair. I was just going to echo the points that have been made. I don't necessarily think it's. I mean, I absolutely love the project, and I think we all members of the Scrutiny Committee know the project inside out. But I think at this point, I'd certainly like to hear about the progress on it. Not necessarily every single step, but certainly the items that we need to scrutinise, and also which will be beneficial for the residents. So I think every other would certainly be beneficial, or if even further than that, then that's fine.
Okay, thank you. There seems to be a feeling then that we have these reports at alternate meetings. So if I could ask Darren for recommendations, including that one.
Thank you, Chair. Some of the themes from the debate. Potential recommendations could be that the committee thanks the Cabinet member for his report. The committee welcomes the reassurance on timescales and project management arrangements that are in place, and that future reports are presented on an alternate meeting basis, in addition to the scrutiny, performance and budget reporting. Thank you, Chair.
Okay, would anybody like to add to those? Councillor Green.
Happy with those, Chairman. But as long as we do have the permission to bring it back at a more regular basis, need a reason.
Yeah, I think we'll take that as read, to be honest. So can we agree those recommendations? I'll take nods and silence as a yes, so thank you. That takes us to item 8, which is scrutiny matters. Scrutiny review of health inequalities. I can report that the task group has scoped the review, started to review documentation and met with a number of key stakeholders to gather evidence. The task group looks forward to presenting their draft report at a future scrutiny committee. So that is the report there, unless anybody has any questions. In which case, item 8B is the Lancashire County Council Health Scrutiny Committee update. That last met last week, Tuesday the 2nd of February, where there was effectively one item on the agenda, which was shaping the Care Together programme and transforming hospital and community services in West Lancashire, Southport and Formby, and I was absolutely riveted. And then we looked at the overview and scrutiny work programme for 2021, and that really was it, short and sweet meeting. That takes us to item 8C, which is meetings and training attended by scrutiny committee members. I think Councillor Michael Green and Councillor Thirlbourne may have a report here. So Councillor Green first.
Thanks, Chairman. Just to say that I did attend the North West Strategic Scrutiny Network meeting. I think it was on the 20th of January. We had an interesting presentation from the Deputy Chief Executive Officer and Section 151 Officer from Manchester. We then broke into some breakout rooms, and the two that I went to was one looking at how we might scrutinise town deals. But I have to say that all of us had no experience of doing so. There doesn't seem to be any scrutiny of town deals to date, but it might be something that we need to consider in the future. And the other breakout room was scrutinising the response to COVID. And on that one, there had been some significant work that had been done at councils up and down the area. But I think we've got that on our forward plan to have a look at that moving forwards. But yeah, the network was interesting. As always, it's always a good opportunity to network, pardon the pun, with colleagues across the north, which is helpful moving forwards. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Thirlbourne.
Thank you, Chair. I was placed on some scrutiny training, which was called, if I just drop that out there, when I kind of find it again, because I've lost it. Some scrutiny leadership training. Don't worry, Chair, I'm not after your position. Which was held on the 19th and 20th of Jan and last Friday, which included action learning, which actually meant I had to sit down and listen to people and keep my mouth shut for quite a bit of time, which was quite an interesting view, and learning more about scrutiny and how it works and how effective it can be. So that's my update, Chair.
Okay, thank you. Item 8D is the Scrutiny Committee forward plan, and we have the opportunity here to review the plan going forward and future items. Do we have any comments? Councillor Green.
Thanks, Chairman. Obviously, this will need to be updated as there's one less cabinet position moving forwards now than there was on this report. But we were due to scrutinise the environment portfolio at the last scrutiny committee meeting, and that was deferred. And so I'm just wondering if we can cover those items that were in the former environment portfolio at the next couple of meetings, so that we give those a good airing and see where the strengths and weaknesses are moving forward.
Okay, thank you. My understanding is that Councillor Titherington is coming to the next meeting, who now has some areas of responsibility there. I wonder if we could invite anybody with the other bits. I'm getting a nod, so we can. And I now have an indication from Councillor Matt Trafford.
Thanks. Do we have an update on when we might be planning to invite housing associations and look into the quality of housing that they're providing? It was something we were going to look at. I might have missed that in the pre-meeting, so sorry for not being able to get there, but I just thought I'd ask.
We are currently liaising with them, and it will be at the first meeting of the municipal year, which I believe is June, is it? Okay, that'll be June. I would also like to suggest that we might want a more in-depth scrutiny of leisure at some stage as well. Probably once its decisions have been taken and it's been put in place, but we can then scrutinise it and see how it's going forward. So are we, Councillor Thirlborn?
Chair, can we put in, I know Councillor Trafford's the mental health here, so I don't know if this is going to clash with them, for mental health for the veterans and mental health in general for the in the borough.
Right, I'm advised that we have a work programme scheduled for June, and we could feed that in at that stage, if that's okay.
Yes, thank you.
Do we have anything else on that? In which case that takes us to 8E, which is the Cabinet Forward Plan. Any comments or questions on that? We all appear to be happy with the Cabinet Forward Plan as it has just been updated and presented. In which case that brings us to the end of the meeting. So if I could thank everybody for your attendance, enjoy the rest of your evening and stay safe.